Hey guys, tonight we're headed to a place that doesn't appear on most maps, a place where fog clings to chimneys, like gossip and chickens strut with more authority than the mayor. We're going to Thornbridge, a crooked-laned village so old its moss has seniority. But don't worry, you won't need a coin, perhaps only a quiet smile, because tonight's story is about Ellen, the witch of Thornbridge, who healed the sick, found lost keys, soothed sleepless babes, and never charged a single penny, just a grin. That's right, one smile, pearly or gap-toothed, sarcastic or sincere. That was her price, which of course made her suspicious. You probably won't survive this era if you're expecting Yelp reviews and health regulations. If you sneeze twice here, the baker starts watching you funny, and someone probably draws a cross in the air. But if you've got an ache in your chest, or a child that cries all night, you knock on Ellen's crooked door and smile. And sometimes, that's enough. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me your location and local time. I love knowing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts, as all proper old stories do, with mist. You're walking up the main lane of Thornbridge, stepping over puddles that reflect the crooked thatch roofs like dream versions of themselves. The village smells like bread crust, chimney soot, and rain-drenched thyme. Your boots squelch and your satchel swings gently against your hip, filled with nothing useful, unless you count a bit of dried plum and an opinion about everything. You've only just arrived, an outsider, but not unwelcome. People here don't ask for names first, they ask what hurts. And if you say your knees, or your heart, or your memory, they'll point with their chin toward the edge of the barley fields. She'll sort you, they mutter, but you'd better bring a grin. You follow the unpaved path where hedges lean like old men in council. A single crow hops from fence post to fence post as if showing you the way. The first thing you notice when her cottage comes into view is the smoke. It's not thick and sooty, but pale and herbal, like something from a happier ghost story. Then the roofline askew, like it nodded off mid-sentence. The garden around it is more ambition than order. Calendula tangled with wild carrots, sage growing in spirals, and a lone turnip blooming like it knows it's an only child. You pause at the gate. It creaks open with that storybook groan that says, "Enter if your intentions are good." Inside, the path crunches with old shell and scattered cloves. Chickens dart out from under a gooseberry bush like they have somewhere better to be. And then you see her, Ellen. She's neither young nor ancient. Her face is lined, but not defeated. Her apron is dusty with flour and pollen, and her eyes, well, you've seen river water clearer, but not kinder. She doesn't speak first. She waits. You realize, maybe too late, that you've been frowning quickly. You smile, not your best smile, not confident or bright, but honest. The corners of her mouth twitch upward. She nods. There it is, she says. Price paid. She waves you in with a flower-covered hand. Inside, her cottage smells like everything warm. Dried rosemary, beeswax, candles, and something baking that probably isn't quite legal by guild standards. The walls are lined with bundles of herbs and little bottles with labels like Chest Hush and Forget a Bit. You sit by the hearth while she pours something from a kettle into a chipped cup. It tastes like memory and honey bark. And just like that, your headache you didn't know you had, gone. Folk don't always like me, she says, stirring something thick in a wooden bowl. Too much cheer is unsettling. They say suspicious. Outside, the wind teases the shutters. A cat, possibly more spirit than mammal, stares at you like it knows your browsing history. You ask her if she's really a witch. She shrugs. They say that every year, around tax time, a joke. You laugh, and she softens a little more. The fire pops just once, enough to make you blink. She ladles something into a little glass jar, corks it, and hands it to you. For bad dreams, she says. You don't owe me. You raise an eyebrow. She points to your face, already paid. Historians still argue whether women like Ellen were healers, herbalists, pagans, or just inconvenient to power. The line between respected midwife and suspicious widow was as thin as paper, especially if you lived alone, knew Latin, or had an owl that visited more than once. But to you, she's not a mystery. She's the one who saw your weariness and offered tea, who knew that the body doesn't always break where it's bruised. Sometimes it breaks where it smiles too little. For too long you step back into the fading daylight with a warm bottle in your pocket and a story beginning to form. A story of a witch, maybe just a woman who remembered what everyone else forgot. That kindness could cost nothing and still be valuable. That evening, as the mist returns to its usual business of making trees look haunted, you tuck the jar under your head like a pillow and sleep longer than you have in weeks. Somewhere, a cat sighs. Somewhere else, a woman stirs tea and watches the night settle like flour on a countertop. You wake with a kind of softness usually reserved for lullabies and freshly baked oat bread. The corked jar sits nearby, faintly warm, as if it borrowed a little firelight in the night and hasn't yet given it back. Outside, the crows are gossiping about breakfast, and the sky glows like watered-down honey. Your boots are dry. Miraculously, your shoulders, usually knotted like ropes left out in the rain, feel oddly unburdened. It's not magic, you tell yourself. Just a good sleep, a good tea, and maybe a good woman who knew how to steep sorrow until it softened. You follow the winding trail back to Ellen's cottage. A rooster looks up like it expected you. A hedgehog trundles across the path like it's running late for a very tiny meeting. You knock on her crooked door. This time, it opens before you finish. You walk loud for someone light. Ellen murmurs, already back at her mortar and pestle. Come, bring your frown so I can chase it off again. You smile. She grunts in approval. The cottage is dim and glowing. A pair of candles flicker in jam jars, and the air hums with cardamom and mint. She hands you a cloth bundle without explaining, and you realize inside is bread still warm, soft as moss. You take a bite. It's faintly sweet, with notes of chamomile and maybe lavender, or some mood you can't quite name. You'll need that. Today we walk. You don't ask where. You just follow. The morning stretches out in golden hush. You pass barley fields that shimmer like brushed fur, and stone walls that probably know more secrets than half the villagers. Ellen hums under her breath, nothing you recognize, but it feels like it fits. She stops beside a hedgerow, tangled with dog rose, and says, "Hold this." She hands you a small cloth sachet tied with twine. Inside, you feel dried leaves, maybe a thistle head, and something smooth like a polished stone. It's for Mrs. Tamsin's youngest, she explains. He dreams of drowning, and she won't sleep if he doesn't. Why not give it to her yourself? She doesn't smile. Ellen says plainly, "So I need you." You think she's joking. She's not. The next cottage is built like it was stacked in a rush stone on stone, roof like a worried eyebrow. You knock, and Mrs. Tamsin opens it with an expression that suggests she's recently tasted lemon and didn't care for it. You smile awkwardly. Yes, but sincerely. She frowns harder. Then, reluctantly, it happens. The corners of her mouth twitch upward. A sigh escapes her like steam from a pie. You offer the sachet. She takes it with a whisper of thanks. Behind you, Ellen nods like a court scribe, who's just recorded a minor miracle dot back on the trail. She says nothing for a while. Then, it's the currency they least expect, isn't it? You think she means villagers, but maybe she means everyone. Historians still argue whether medieval villages were governed more by fear of the unknown or by the quiet contracts of neighborliness. Truth is, both probably lived in the same room, sharing stew and suspicion in equal measure. You reach a clearing near the brook, where wild fennel grows like it's in a race. Ellen pulls out a faded basket and begins collecting sprigs with her sleeve tied up. Arms weathered but steady dot, she teaches you what to pick, what to leave. Too much of anything, she says, even sweetness, will sour the tongue. You help her gather leaves you can't pronounce and roots that look like shrunken limbs. All the while, she tells you about the plants, not just their names, but their moods. Willow won't listen if it's too sunny. Bethany likes to be thanked. Nettle forgives, but only once. You don't know if it's real or folklore or some blend in between, but you nod, because it makes sense in a way city books never do. On the walk back, she slows by a tree split down the middle. Lightning, she says. 2 summers ago, the alderman said it was a sign. A sign of what? She shrugs. That he didn't like my gooseberry cordial, I think. You laugh. So does she. The tree, though dead, stands. Maybe stubbornness counts for something. As you reach her garden again, you notice something strange. A little wooden box nailed near the gate, carved with a crude smiley face. What's that for? Offerings, she says. Sometimes they leave turnips, sometimes nothing. That's all right. Does anyone ever leave coins? They tried once, she mutters, unlatching the gate. I threw them into the compost heap. You're beginning to realize something. She doesn't just work with herbs and tinctures. She trades in softness, in gladness, in the overlooked magic of being kind without a receipt. In the doorway, she pauses and turns. He's still smiling. She asks, "You hadn't noticed, but you are." She nods. "Then you'll be fine for tomorrow." You blink. What's tomorrow? But she's already gone inside, kettle humming. Something on the stove that smells like nutmeg, and there, you sit on the stoop, sipping the rest of the bread's crust from your pocket, and wonder if maybe the oldest kinds of witchcraft were simply the ones that reminded people how to be warm again. By morning, the sky has arranged itself into a polite overcast, a soft grey shawl draped over the hills and hedges. The crows haven't started bickering yet, which means you're up early. Not by choice, but because Ellen poked you with a spoon, and said, "Time to walk the truth out of the dirt." Cryptic, yes, but you've stopped expecting plain answers. You're chewing on a piece of barley, oatcake, when she hands you a knotted cloth bundle. Inside are 6 charms made of knotted string, bits of eggshell, sprigs of fennel, and for some reason a carved button shaped like a duck. "What's this for?" you ask, carefully avoiding a sneeze near the fennel. "Protection," she says. "From what?" She shrugs. "Mostly from themselves." You follow her through the fields, where morning dew clings to your boots like overly affectionate cats. The barley here rustles even without wind, as if gossiping about your presence. She points to the fence line there. The Marsh family's boundary. It's not a proper fence so much as a suggestion. A crooked line of rocks and leaning sticks, half swallowed by grass. Ellen steps over it like it's a ritual, and you do the same. Slightly less gracefully, a scarecrow watches, slumped and moss-bearded. You could swear it's size. Ellen pulls a charm from her pocket. One of the duck ones and places it in a knot of thornbush. "Mrs. Marsh lost her 5th babe last year," she murmurs, says she hears crying in the wheat. You nod, unsure if that's metaphor or memory. Maybe both. She moves with purpose but no haste, her fingers brushing the barley like she's asking it permission. She mutters something, an old rhyme. Maybe. You only catch a few words. Sun-warmed sleep, root don't rot, and leave the child dreams whole. It's not showy. There's no dramatic chanting, no smoke, just hands, breath, and intention. Historians still argue whether medieval witches had real rituals, or simply inherited local traditions repackaged with enough mystery to alarm the church. What's clear is that their strength wasn't in spectacle but in remembering the old rules, the ones about balance, timing, and listening to what the land doesn't say out loud. Ellen pauses to pull something from her poquita single seed, which she tucks into a crack between stones near the field's edge. "For hope," she explains, like that's the most obvious thing in the world. You make a note to always carry seeds. A pheasant darts across your path like a flamboyant comet. Ellen doesn't flinch. "The Marsh boy's spirit might be in that one," she says offhandedly, then snorts. "But probably not. He was quieter." She leads you through the fields, the barley brushing your arms in rhythm. You think about how many steps she's taken here, how many silent exchanges between woman and soil, woman and wind, woman and the ache of someone else's grief. Eventually you come upon a tree stump surrounded by wild thyme and an alarming number of snails. Ellen sits without ceremony and begins, packing a pipe with something that smells like clove and secrets. "This is the place where folks come when they think they're alone," she says, "to cry, to sing, to whisper guilt into the moss." You glance at the tree stump, now worn smooth. It feels true. She lights her pipe with a twig pulled from the coals she's kept in a tin wrapped in lambskin. You wonder how long she's kept that flame alive. "Maybe years," Ellen, you ask, after a moment. Wise smiles. She doesn't answer right away, just exhales a curl of smoke that swirls toward the overcast sky like it's returning a message. Because smiles are given, not taken. She finally says, "No one can owe you one. That makes them clean." You turn this over like a smooth stone in your mind, she adds, and they confuse the suspicious. Back in the village, folks greet you with nods. Not warm, exactly, but less wary. Maybe it's the mud on your boots that proves you've been somewhere old. One child waves. You wave back. The child beams. That grin is the kind of currency Ellen would approve of. Back at the cottage, Ellen places her charms in a drawer under a stack of yellowing envelopes, tied with red ribbon. "What's in those?" Unsmiled letters, she says, still waiting for the right face to read them. You wonder how many aches they hold. That evening, you help her grind dried rosehips and angelica root while the kettle hums a song of its own. She doesn't instruct you much, just hums and watches. You feel clumsy but present, like a spoon that's finally found the right cup. Later, while dusk paints the world violet, Ellen gives you a charm of your own. It's not for protection, she says. It's a reminder of what. She leans forward, eyes crinkling, that someone once thought your smile was worth enough to mend a broken thing. You tuck it into your satchel like it's made of gold. Outside, the barley fields quiet. The scarecrow leans a little less sadly, and the stars, now poking through the veil of cloud, seem to wink in time with the fireflies. The Thornbridge market is a tangled affair, half-open stalls, half-whispered politics. It's where dried eels hang beside prayer beads, and the cheese smells like either a blessing or a warning, depending on the weather. You walk it slowly, trailing Ellen as she inspects apples by weight and herbs by memory, murmuring things like, "Too red," "Grew in guilt," or "This one's quiet, likely stolen." She pays for nothing. Instead, people nod, smile, some less enthusiastically than others, and let her fill a cloth sack with dried beans, some late pears, and 2 strange roots that look like withered noses. In return, they get a question about their child's cough, or a gentle prod about mending a grudge. Sometimes she just winks. That alone seems to cancel debts. You ask if this is normal. Normal's just routine with better PR, she replies, biting into a pear like it once offended her. You notice the way people look at her, some with fondness, some with that look you give a spider on the ceiling, intolerant, but aware it might suddenly do something alarming. And then there's the aldermen. 3 of them sit near the bread stall, all draped in dark cloaks like they've mistaken themselves for ravens. They're speaking low, but the tone is unmistakable, wary disapproval wrapped in official phrases. One gestures vaguely toward Ellen's back. Another holds up a coin and mutters something about true economy. Ellen's hearing may be weathered, but her intuition, sharp as fennel tea. She leans to you. Watch them count what can't be weighed. You smirk, then notice something in your pocket. A small cloth sachet, one she didn't give you. Inside, a piece of twine tied in 3 knots, and a single dried petal. "What's this?" "For the baker," she whispers. His hands hurt at dawn. How does this help? It remembers him. That's enough. She steps into the bakery with the casual grace of someone who's never been charged rent. The baker, round, flour-covered, and visibly surprised, greets her with half a grimace. She says nothing, just hands him the sachet and smiles. He frowns, sniffs it, then almost, despite himself, chuckles, a low, wheezy laugh that seems to lift years off his shoulders. She leaves with 2 rolls, neither paid for. You walk with her past the worker, who bows slightly, and the scribe, who visibly crosses himself. Someone hisses "hedge devil" under their breath, loud enough to be heard. You turn, bristling, but Ellen is already offering you one of the rolls. "Don't waste teeth on old vinegar," she says. Historians still argue whether village markets were centers of connection or competition. Probably both. The local economy relied not just on coins, but on favors, glances, and shared bread crusts. Ellen navigates it like she built the place herself. But even here, kindness worn so boldly starts to draw attention, especially when it refuses to curtsy before coin. Back at her cottage, she unpacks the day's gathering onto the scrubbed table. The pears go into a stew pot, the roots are split and set to dry, and one particularly nervous beetle that hitched a ride is gently evicted with a whisper and a fig leaf. You sit chewing your roll thoughtfully. Why don't they like you? They do, she says, until someone tells them not to. Who? She doesn't answer. Instead, she pulls a small wooden box from under the hearth. Inside are smile tokens, literally, little wooden discs, each carved with a grin, some wide, some crooked, some careful, some like afterthoughts. People used to leave these, she says, before suspicion started dressing up as order. You turn one over in your palm. It's small, warm, worn. A child probably carved it, you think. Or maybe someone trying to remember what joy looked like on their face. They'll stop soon, Ellen murmurs, smiling. I mean, if the aldermen have their way. You want to say they won't, that people are better than that. But you've seen enough to hesitate. Outside, the wind has picked up. Clouds gather like councilmen. A storm perhaps, or something quieter. Later, As twilight stretches its limbs, you find Ellen seated by the door with a candle and a pot of blue dye. "What are you doing, marking?" she says, dipping a brush. For those who forget how to grin, she paints the inside of the wooden gate with a sweeping curved simple light, barely visible unless you look from the right angle. You lean in, noticing the paint smells like rosemary and vinegar. "Is it magic?" "Not yet," she says. "It only works when someone sees it and smiles." You lie awake longer than usual that night, watching candlelight dance on the ceiling beams. The market, the murmurs, the wooden smile, Torquin's eyes swirl behind your eyes like dust in the rafters. You don't dream, but you wake up smiling anyway. You wake to snuffling dot. At first you think it's Ellen, but no, it's coming from outside. You peer through the crooked wooden shutters and find the source. A hedgehog, round as a turnip, is nudging a small folded leaf toward the garden gate, like it has a very important appointment. Ellen is already up, of course. She's seated by the fire, stirring something thick and orange in a pot. The smell hits you a second later, sweet, tangy, with a suspicious undernote of mustard, pumpkin and horseradish, she says, not looking up, for knees that act like weather vanes. You sit on the stool, watching the hedgehog, now making a lap around the stone path, quite possibly lost, or performing a ritual. Ellen finally glances outside, following your gaze. "He's back. You know this one. He comes when someone's soul is heavy, or when I leave the oat bin unlatched." You both watch as the creature completes a perfect circle, then disappears into a clump of yarrow. In its place sits a small, dew-speckled leaf, curled tightly, like a scroll. Ellen rises, dusts her hands, and steps out barefoot. She retrieves the leaf, with a reverence usually reserved for royal decrees. Inside, she unfurls it, and yes, there's writing barely visible, pressed by fingernail or thorn tip. One sentence: "I cannot stop hearing the wind at night." You wait for an explanation. She offers one only by gesture, setting down her spoon and pulling out three things: a pinch of crushed lavender, a copper coin worn smooth on both faces, and a small lump of beeswax carved into the shape of, well, either a duck or a particularly abstract potato. "These," she says, "are for remembering how to forget." She places them gently into a pouch of woven flax, ties it tight, and sets it on the windowsill. You're tempted to ask more, but the look on her face tells you that answers today are out of season. Historians still argue whether such talismans were truly meant for healing, or if they served a social purpose, reassuring tokens, like lullabies in physical form. Whether the magic was in the object or the giving of it remains debated. But here, now, watching her hands move with calm certainty, it feels like both. You spend the rest of the morning in the garden, not weeding. Exactly, Ellen doesn't believe in pulling up something just because it grows without asking. The wild has its own vote, she says, tugging a dandelion only after it's whispered something she doesn't share. Instead, you help sort herbs by mood. Yes, mood, mugworts. "Been sulking," she tells you. "Set it beside the rosemary. It'll perk up with a bit of gossip." You blink, waiting for the sarcasm. There is none. She's dead serious. You obey, if only because it seems to work. By noon, the entire garden hums like it's practicing for an unseen orchestra. Then a knock, sharp, too sharp. At the gate stands Alderman Prynne, robes too fine for someone standing in mud. Behind him, Alderman Corwin, eyes narrow, and Alderman Thewlis, who always looks like he's smelled something disappointing. "Goodwife Ellen," Prynne begins. "Just Ellen," she says, not inviting them in. "We've had word," Corwin adds, "of improper gatherings." Ellen tilts her head. "You mean the snails?" They do not laugh. Thewlis clears his throat. "Folks say you've been collecting offerings, smiles even, instead of coin. That's irregular." Is irregular illegal? You ask before thinking. Ellen's glance warns you, but the aldermen have already turned toward you. "And who are you?" Prynne demands. "A guest," Ellen says, "passing through, curious but harmless, like foxes in henhouses," mutters Corwin. Ellen smiles. "Then I suppose we'll need cleverer hens." They leave in a huff, cloaks swirling like offended tea towels. You watch them disappear down the lane, the crows following like unpaid bailiffs. Inside, Ellen sets a kettle on the fire, and sighs not fearfully, but like someone asked her to rewrite a letter she already mailed. "That wasn't about smiles," she says. "No, they're worried people remember they can give freely." that not every healing has a price tag. You think about that. About how a single grin exchanged for tea and rest could threaten the balance of a place that prefers ledgers over laughter. Night. You sit by the window, watching fireflies hover like thoughts not yet spoken. Ellen hums, sewing a patch into her sleeve. The hedgehog doesn't return, but the leaf is still there, gently curling back into itself. When you finally fall asleep, it's to the sound of wind through yarrow and the faint rustle of Ellen whispering to her herbs. You dream, but only faintly, of warm bread, blue fences, and something just out of reach that makes you want to smile. You don't realize you've woken until you hear her voice, soft, rhythmic, not quite a chant. Lynn is speaking to the steam rising from her cup. You sit up on your straw mattress, the quilt heavy with the scent of time and long forgotten stories. It's still dark, but not entirely. Dawn is pacing the horizon like a cat waiting to be let in. She notices you, offers a nod. Thought you'd sleep through this one. What is this one? Hot mending. You blink to sleep from your eyes and follow her out the cottage door, into the cool pre-dawn air. The ground is still wet from dew. Fog coils along the earth like a cautious snake. She leads you to a clearing behind the garden, one you hadn't noticed before. It's bordered by hawthorn and yew, trees that lean toward each other like they're exchanging secrets. In the center is a small ring of stones, and in the middle of that, a battered cauldron, its bottom blackened, its rim crusted with what might be moss or thyme. Ellen kneels beside it. From her apron, she pulls a pouch and begins to add things with the grace of someone folding a letter. A handful of dried marigold petals, a sliver of apple skin, a strip of linen tied in a knot. From a widow in Greenbrook, she murmurs, she dreams of silence now. It's better than grief. You realize, slowly, that none of this is for show. No audience, no sales, just ritual, just care. You help her gather twigs and build a small fire beneath the cauldron. The flames lick the iron, gently, casting long shadows over the stones. When the water begins to steam, she sprinkles in crushed rose hips, muttering the name of someone you don't know. Is this a spell? No, she says. It's a story that knows how to listen. Historians still argue whether early witches wrote formal spells or simply passed down customs, orally adjusting as needed, like soup recipes. In Ellen's case, there's no scroll, no incantations, repetition, rhythm, and memory. A kind of prayer made of scent and timing. You sit beside her, watching the water turn from clear to honey gold. She doesn't stir it with a stick, but with a long bone-handled spoon that may have once belonged to a deer, a saint, or someone's favorite aunt. Hard to tell. Then she says, "It's for old Magda's boy. He carries his sorrow like a stone in his boot." You nod. "Bring the lad to me tomorrow," she says. "But first, he'll need to leave something behind." Like what? A secret, a button, a lie. He told his mother any of them will do. You glance up at her. She shrugs. Can't fill a heart that's already full of rust. The brew bubbles low, releasing an aroma that makes your throat ache gently. Not in pain, but in recognition, like nostalgia wrapped in nettle dot. As the sun begins to stretch itself over the trees, Ellen scoops some of the liquid into a small glazed jar, stops it with a cork, and wraps it in wool. The rest she pours onto the earth. Always return the remainder, she explains, or the dreams will sour. Back at the cottage, you notice her shelves are new. Each bottle, each bundle, each jar isn't labeled like a modern apothecary. Some have names for Lyle, when he forgets joy. Others just symbols, a wave, a closed eye, a crooked spoon. You realize they're not medicines, they're fragments of people, held gently, never claimed, as she prepares a tea that smells suspiciously like the potion. You ask, what if someone doesn't want to be mended? She pauses. Then we wait. That afternoon, the villagers are quieter, not distrustful, but subdued, like a bell has been rung in a room no one wants to acknowledge. You hear murmurs. Aldermen meeting again. They say the witch collects secrets. Did you hear about the hedgehog? Even so, people come. A girl with a scrape on her elbow. An old man asking about his wife's snoring. A boy who won't stop biting his thumb. Ellen listens to each, nods thoughtfully, and sends them away with bundles of herbs, jars of jam, owns a pebble in a silk pouch. Your favorite is the boy. What's this for? He asks, holding the pebble. It remembers when you weren't afraid. She says. He stares at it like it might blink, then whispers, "Thank you." and sprints away. That as the sun fades and the air thickens with wood smoke and expectation, Ellen pulls out a small wooden box you haven't seen before. Inside are folded bits of cloth, each stitched with different colors and shapes. One is blue with 3 stitched dots. Another has a red X. Some are nearly blank. These are echoes, she says. Moments people thought were gone. Do they work? Sometimes just holding them reminds you you're not hollow. You don't ask for one, but she gives you one anyway. It's green with a little crooked line like a river or a smile drawn by a sleepy hand. Carry it when words fail, she says, already turning away. That night, before you sleep, you press it against your chest and breathe deeply outside. The wind sings through the eaves, and the cauldron out back still steams faintly, like it's dreaming. Sunday arrives in Thornbridge with all the subtlety of a creaky church door and a slightly too loud cough during prayer. You wake to bells clanging across the rooftops, echoing off damp thatch and stone, shaking sparrows from sleep and reminding everyone they still owe their reverence. Ellen is already dressed, though not in anything that would pass inspection under holy scrutiny. Her apron is clean, but her boots are muddy. Her hair is braided with a sprig of lavender. She carries a basket of fresh bread, not a Bible. You going to the chapel? You ask, rubbing sleep from your eyes. I go as far as the stone wall, she says. Then I sit, and the bread listens for me. The chapel sits at the center of the village, like a weary hub surrounded by gossiping spokes. Its roof is nudinated by the alderman last winter, but its stones are old, older than record, each one rumored to have soaked up scenes like sponges. You walk with her anyway. The villagers eye you both as you pass. Some nod, some look away quickly. One small girl waves, then is immediately shushed by her grandmother. At the chapel gate, Ellen stops. She removes a cloth from her basket, revealing 4 round loaves, dusted with ash and fennel. They smell like patience. She places them on a stone bench and sits beside them. Not everyone wants sermons, she says. Some want bread. That's worship enough. You go inside. It's dim. The walls are carved with scripture and soot. A cracked fresco above the altar shows Saint Elian fending off wolves with a cross that looks oddly like a pitchfork. The pews creak like they resent being used. The vicar is a tall man with sad eyes and a voice like boiled carrots. His sermon is about temptation. His examples feel unusually specific. Those who wander from the Lord's path, he says, may walk it alone, even if they offer sweetness instead of truth. A few heads turn toward the window, toward the bread on the bench, toward Ellen. You shift in your seat. Historians still argue whether clergy in small villages genuinely believed in witchcraft or simply used it as a tool to consolidate power. It's possible they feared losing influence to women who healed more effectively, quietly, and without needing tithes. In Thornbridge, that tension is thick enough to slice with a communion wafer. You leave before the final hymn. Outside, Ellen is gone. So is the bread. In its place sits a folded cloth and a single button. She took the hunger, says a boy walking past. Left the reminder. Back at the cottage, she's peeling turnips with a rhythm that suggests she never left. You heard him, you say, oh, I did, and she shrugs. He's afraid the path to heaven smells like rosemary and yeast. You sit by the fire. The air is heavy with the scent of roasted roots and defiance. That afternoon, visitors slow. Only to knock. One woman with a feverish child, and a stonemason whose fingers lock up when it rains. Ellen tends to both with her usual grace, but you can see her watching the path, measuring absences. At dusk, a figure appears, a stranger. He wears robes that almost shimmer, and he carries a book too large to be merely for reading. His hair is neat, but his eyes are tired in a way that suggests long hours writing things he wished he could unwrite. He does not smile. Goodwife Ellen, he says, standing just past her gate, I come on behalf of the diocese. Tell them the bread was shared, not sold. This is not about bread. No, she says, it never is. They speak for a while, too quietly for you to hear, but when he leaves, he does so without the book. It remains clutched in Ellen's arms like a bundle of thorns. You ask what it is. Proof, she says. Of what? That some folk will write down a lie just to make it feel real. She sets it on the shelf beside the jars. Doesn't open it. You open it later. When she's tending the fire, it's a ledger. Names, accusations, Notes, like gathered herbs at dusk, and woman, claimed healing without licensed oils, beside Ellen's name, takes smiles as payment. Suspicious. You shut the book gently, afraid it might spill something you can't put back. That evening, Ellen sews a red thread through a piece of plain linen and hangs it on the doorpost. Won't stop them, she says, but it'll remind them of what. She looks at you, weary but calm. That warmth isn't always a fire to fear. You don't sleep easily that night, but when you do, you dream of bread that hums with comfort, of sermons spoken through the steam of stew pots, and of smiles passed hand to hand, like coins no one can pocket. Rain falls like old gossip, slow at first, then insistent. You wake to it, drumming on the shutters, pooling in the garden paths, and tugging at the hems of cloaks already 2 inches too short. Ellen stands in the doorway, one boot on, one in hand, watching the grey curtain outside, as if waiting for an argument. She's not eager to start. There's something you should see, she says, buckling her boot. You follow her out into the wet. The air smells of churned earth and the regrets of chickens who failed to make it under shelter in time. You pass the garden, now sagging and glistening, and head toward the chapel, again though not quite. Ellen veers behind it, toward a crumbling outbuilding you hadn't noticed before, a half-shed, half-cellar thing, roof drooping like a frown. She pulls open the door with a squelched dot inside. Everything smells of old wood, wax, and mildew. There are shelves, scrolls, boxes labeled in fading ink, and at the center, a long, low table bearing one heavy, bound book. Thornbridge records, she says, every birth, death, and crime tallied by hand. She lights a lantern and opens the book to a page marked with a piece of red yarn. Your name is not there, of course, but hers is. Many times, each entry different, offered herbal concoction to alderman's wife without permission, suspected of influencing child's dreams via unknown means, charged nothing for service, accepted smile, returned child's lost shoe, no questions asked, observed speaking with hedgehog for 3 minutes uninterrupted. You try not to laugh at that last one, but Ellen raises an eyebrow. It was 4 minutes, she says dryly. Historians still argue whether these records were used as legal precedent or simply as a ledger of suspicion, a long, passive letter to the future. Either way, the sheer volume of her appearances in the margins and notes is staggering. I found this, she says, when I was 17. The first time someone called me, which in ink. You glance at her. I took it. She adds, to keep the next girl from reading her name in here. Do they know? They suspect. That's why they keep rewriting me. You flip through the pages. The ink darkens, entries sharpen. The more kindness she gives, the more formal the suspicion becomes. The smiles that once passed without comment are now listed as unofficial exchanges, suspect emotional currency, and your favorite refusal to charge fair market value, possible heresy, Smiling's heresy. If it leads to trust without tithe, she says, then yes. The rain outside turns insistent, as if to emphasize her point. You find one more entry, faded, but not forgotten. Ellen of the Lane witnessed at the river speaking to her reflection. No reply given. You glance up. She meets your eye, her face unreadable. Were you really talking to your reflection? I was telling it not to flinch. She closes the book. You walk back through the wet, not speaking much. The rain has softened the edges of the village. Everything is blurred, like a painting that wasn't allowed to dry before the brush came back for revenge. At the cottage, she places the record book in a chest beneath the floorboards. She says nothing more about it. Instead, she turns to a drawer and pulls out a parcel, oilskin wrapped, sealed with wax the color of dusk. She opens it, revealing a stack of old letters, folded many times over, none addressed, all written in the same looping hand. These were left here, she says, over the years by who? Those who couldn't speak. You unfold one. I dream of drowning in silence. Please remember me. Another. I never told her. I forgave her. Another still. He died calling my name. I was in the barn. You stop reading. The words feel warm in your chest and heavy in your hands. Why are you showing me these? Because you've smiled, she says. And once you've smiled, you carry more than your own thoughts. That night, the storm breaks. You help her light candles, one in each window. One on the hearth, one in the garden under a clay pot with a chipped rim. What are they for? To remind the night that someone's awake, she says. You sleep under extra blankets, The wind sighs around the corners of the cottage, muttering to itself. You dream, again, faintly, this time of a great book with no ink, only pressed leaves, feathers, and bits of old wool. When you wake, the world is cleaner, quieter, as if the storm washed more than mud away. The morning after the rain smells like clean slate and wet moss. Sunlight pushes gently through the clouds, not rushing anything, just nudging life back into motion. Ellen is already outside, bare feet in puddles, pinching damp rosemary from the garden and muttering to a worm that stranded itself on the path. He's trying to move uphill, she tells you. Ambition's a fine thing until it drowns you. You blink, still groggy. Are we not having tea first? We'll have tea with ghosts, she says. We're walking. You've learned not to argue, Jot. She leads you away from the familiar lanes, past the stone well, past the goat that always looks surprised to see you, and out into the open fields where the brambles thicken and the paths grow shy. Birds chirp with exaggerated cheer, like they're overcompensating for last night's storm. Eventually, you come to the river. It's not grand, just a wide stream with reeds along its banks and stepping stones that look suspiciously slippery. A rickety footbridge leans downstream, and above it, willows bow like penitents. She stops at the river's edge, kneels, and places a sprig of lavender into the current. For him, she says. You don't ask who. You don't need to. Then she speaks, not to you, but to the water. I remember, she says, and that's enough. You wait. She stands again, brushing dirt from her knees. I was brought here, she says quietly, many years ago, when I wasn't yet wise, when I still thought the world was kind as long as I was kind back. You say nothing, sensing this isn't a story she tells often. There was a boy, no older than 15, feverish, delirious, his mother desperate. They brought me because the village healer had run out of ideas. I brought willow bark and prayers, and warmth. She kneels again, this time running her fingers along the damp stones. He lived 3 days, died on the 4th, and when he did, the vicar said, it was my fault, said my herbs were distractions, that my presence was the final straw. She looks up at you, eyes calm but distant. They whispered that I stole his breath, that I asked for nothing, which meant I'd taken something greater. You sit beside her, the river licking the shore with a sound like soft apologies. Was that the first time they called you witch? She nods, at least with their mouths. You ask what she did after, left, for a while. Found a place in the woods where the stars didn't judge me. You imagine her, alone in the dark, herbs in hand, kindness still alive in her chest, despite everything. But I came back, she says, because others started leaving notes, not accusations. Thanks, petals, buttons, pebbles, little things. That said, you mattered, and I remember. She unwraps a small bundle from her sleeve linen, faded and soft. Inside is a tiny, frayed doll. A boy's doll. No face, no name. He gave me this, she says, before he died. Said I should have someone to talk to when the grown-ups were being foolish. You take a breath, slow and quiet. The river reflects you both, her steady, you flickering. Historians still argue whether women like Ellen were condemned for their practices, their independence, or simply their refusal to charge coin. The boy's death, tragic as it was, offered a pretext, but it's possible the real offense was that she healed without asking permission. You walk home with her in silence. That afternoon, a woman knocks at the door. Ellen greets her gently, offers a stool, a slice of oat bread, and a cup of nettle tea. The woman unwraps a kerchief and reveals a clump of tangled hair. It won't stop falling out. She whispers. Ellen doesn't ask why. She just nods, opens her drawer, and removes a thin comb made of bone, its teeth worn but whole. Use this, she says, once before sleep, once at dawn. Don't think about what's leaving. Think about what's staying. The woman smiles, hesitantly, then fuller. You watch her leave with her shoulders straighter. Ellen turns to you. Grief isn't always loud, she says. Sometimes it just wants company. That evening, as the sun bleeds gently into the hills, she builds a small fire in the hearth and begins sewing something new. A small pouch, green velvet, with silver thread curling across it like a river. For the boy's mother, she explains. But he died years ago. She still remembers. You realize, the tea, the herbs, the smiles, none of them are about fixing. They're about honoring, about saying, in a dozen quiet ways, you are seen. Outside, the wind rustles the willow branches by the river. They seem to sway slower now, like they're listening. The frost fair comes with a rattle of wheels and a clatter of unfamiliar voices. It isn't supposed to be here yet. Here it is, sprawling like a travelling sneeze across the outer fields of Thornbridge, banners snapping in the chill wind, and unfamiliar wagons lining the hedgerows like nosy cousins. You wake to the sound of drums, not martial, exactly more theatrical. A slow, heartbeat thump, meant to stir curiosity before alarm. Ellen is already at the gate, arms crossed, eyebrows suspiciously symmetrical. It's early, she mutters, the frost, the fair. The villagers swarm like wasps in wool, drawn by the smell of roasted chestnuts and the promise of distraction. Children run ahead of parents, dogs bark at puppet carts, and a man, in a crimson doublet, juggles turnips while muttering poetry about betrayal. You're pretty sure none of it rhymes. Ellen does not go down right away. She watches from the gate, eyes narrowed like she's measuring not distance, but intention. Eventually, she sighs and reaches for her scarf. "Come on," she says. "If they're going to sell trinkets, I may as well see if any of them are cursed." The fair is loud, not just in sound, but in color. Yellows too bright for winter, blues that look imported from dreams. Booths hawk everything from painted eggs to miracle tinctures with names like Dr. Pennyworth's play golf, powder and hearty grog for ghoulish humors. You pass a stall where a woman claims to read fortunes using only goose bones and old bread. Ellen snorts. "Second cousin," she mutters, bit dramatic. Still, you notice something else. Whispers. Not the usual ones that follow Ellen through town like shadows. These are fresher, hungrier. Outsiders ask, "Is that her?" Villagers respond with shrugs and half-truths. Some say she cures colic with moonlight. Others claim she dances with hares at midnight. A few just say, "Don't look too long." You stop at a puppet booth. The play is simple. A village, a healer, and a priest. The healer cures, the priest frowns, and the villagers turn angry. The puppets move with jerky glee. Then comes the fire. You look at Ellen, she looks away. "They're mocking you." You whisper. "No," she says, "they're warning me." At the edge of the fair, beyond the stalls, a cluster of tents bears the insignia of the regional court. Not lawmen exactly, but officials who smile too much and blink too little. One of them notices you watching and nods. His teeth are very white. You return to the cottage in silence. She sets her scarf down, then washes her hands, as if removing more than dirt. "Why now?" you ask. "Why bring a fair before the frost?" "To sniff the air," she replies. "See, who's ready to be frightened? Frightened of you, of remembering they once needed me." That night, the moon rises sharp and cold. Ellen sets out small bowls of rosemary water around the windows. "For clarity," she says. You offer to help. She hands you a bundle of dried marjoram and a small bell carved from antler. "Ring it if you see someone watching." You don't, not that night. But the next morning, the bread left on the doorstep is stale. No smile tokens accompany it. Historians still argue whether traveling fairs served merely to entertain or if they carried more subtle motives: news, inspection, even recruitment for quiet inquisitions. What's certain is this: their arrival often preceded shifts in the wind. The villagers are different now, still polite, still quiet, but their smiles feel thinner, like dough rolled too wide at market. The aldermen speak in low tones. They don't meet Ellen's eyes. When she buys onions, the seller places them down like they might bite. You ask her if she's worried. She doesn't answer. But that night, she sharpens her knives with slower, more deliberate strokes. Then she makes a new charm. Unlike the others, it's heavy: twine, iron filings, crushed sage, and one silver coin with a whole board through its center. "What's it for?" you ask. "Not healing." "Then what?" She presses it into your palm, witnessing. You don't ask more. Instead, you carry it in your pocket as the village begins to tilt. Just a little, like something shifting its weight before standing, fully upright. And every time you feel the cold bite of metal through cloth, you remind yourself, smiles are currency, but memory is resistance. The knock comes just past sundown, not the hesitant tap of a neighbor needing herbs, not the polite double rap of a baker looking for a charm against dough that won't rise. No, this one is sharp, formal, like someone announcing their authority. Before they even cross the threshold, Ellen doesn't move. You look at her. She nods once. You open the door. There are 3 of them, None from Thornbridge. Wears the badge of the circuit judge, small, iron, shaped like a balanced scale that's never quite level. The second is dressed like a clerk, carrying a book so full of parchment scraps it looks like it's molting. The third stands back, expression neutral, hands folded in front of him like he's praying or waiting to pounce. The judge clears his throat. Ellen of Thornbridge. She inclines her head, still breathing. Last I checked. We're here to conduct an inquiry, not a trial, not yet. You feel something cold settle in your stomach. The clerk begins to write. The third man, still unnamed, steps just inside the door. His boots don't leave mud. His eyes scan everything. Do you offer potions and charms in exchange for payment? The judge asks. I do. What sort of payment? A smile. He waits. That is not legal tender. Ellen smiles. It's not taxable either. Historians still argue whether inquiries like these were spontaneous or orchestrated well in advance. Often, the arrival of a frost fair was a prelude to them away to collect names, test responses, and gauge who among the villagers would nod when asked to accuse. You offer them tea. Only the clerk accepts. He sips it without looking at you, his hand moving steadily over the parchment. Have you ever asked someone to recite a phrase in return for your help? The judge continues. No, but I've listened while they did. Have you ever practiced night rituals? Ellen shrugs. I boil water after dusk. I suppose that counts. Do you keep symbols? Don't you? You almost laugh. The unnamed man moves toward the shelves. He studies the jars, the bundles of herbs, the woven pouch with silver thread that Ellen made just days ago. He picks it up. What is this for? He asks. To remember. Remember what? Ellen meets his gaze. That kindness costs nothing, but forgetting it can cost everything. He says nothing, returns the pouch to the shelf. The judge makes a note. We'll continue tomorrow. Publicly, of course. They leave without thanking you, without closing the gate behind them. The wind does it for them, eventually. That night, Ellen brews no tea. She wraps the ledger, the one from the chapel, cellar, in cloth and places it beneath the floorboards again. Then she pulls out a tin of old dried calendula petals and begins sorting them, not for a purpose, just for the rhythm of it. Will they charge you? Perhaps. Why now? She looks up. Because I never stopped smiling, and they think it means I've gotten away with something. Outside, the cottage is quiet, but the village is not. Voices rise in clusters. Questions pass like bread crusts. She's never harmed anyone, but she doesn't follow the rules. I heard she once made a man forget his grief. You stand at the window. A candle flickers in a nearby house. Then another dot. Then one goes out. Then two. Fear spreads like frost in. Quiet. Hard to scrape off. Ellen moves to the hearth, pulls out a blackened kettle, and stokes the fire. What are you doing? Getting ready. For what? For their questions. And my answers. Will you lie? No, even if they want you to. She looks at you, calm and steady, especially then. The next morning, she dresses with care. A clean apron, a sprig of thyme behind her ear. The crooked wooden smile token she carved weeks ago now hangs from a cord at her neck. You ask if she wants you there. She nods. Witnessing. She reminds you, it matters. At the square, a small platform has been raised. Not a scaffold, not yet. Just a stage for voices. That the judge stands in the center. The villagers circle in, tight and tense. Children are kept back. The baker avoids your eye. The scribe carries his inkpot like it might spill secrets. Ellen steps forward. When called, she doesn't flinch. You hold the iron charm in your coat pocket. It feels heavier today. The judge begins to speak, and so does the wind. The wind hushes the square, as though even the leaves are holding their breath. You stand at the edge of the gathering, shoulders tight, the iron charm warm in your pocket from being clenched too long. Ellen steps onto the platform like it's just another garden stone, her boots making no sound on the wood. The judge raises his hand not for order, but to claim the moment. The clerk, already scribbling, dips his pen once, twice, like he's sketching a gallows in slow motion. Ellen of Thornbridge, the judge begins. You are summoned not for trial, but for the illumination of truth in front of your fellow villagers. We seek clarity, not condemnation. You hear someone snort in the crowd. The judge ignores it. You are accused of conducting acts outside of ecclesiastical and civic guidance, of healing without license, of receiving unorthodox compensation. and of undue influence. Ellen folds her arms lightly. You forgot smiling too much. A few villagers titter nervously. The baker's daughter bites her sleeve. Even the vicar fidgets. The judge presses on. Do you deny that you offer cures, charms, and comfort in exchange for smiles? I do. Then you deny the accusation. I confirm the practice. He falters. One of the aldermen Thulis pipes up. And is that not a mockery of trade? What man here could pay taxes in grins? Ellen raises her brow. Then perhaps your taxes ask for the wrong things. The judge moves quickly. Let us speak of methods. Do you use symbols? I use ribbon, string, herbs, buttons. I find meaning in small things. And meaning outside the church is dangerous. So is meaning that forgets joy. You glance around. Eyes flicker. Some toward the ground, some toward her. Most caught in between. Then they bring out the evidence. Bundles of dried herbs, charm pouches, one smile token, and a small familiar sachetha, one you delivered to Mrs. Tamson days ago. Did you make this? The judge asks. Ellen nods. It was for a child, to keep his dreams quiet. Using what? Lavender fennel, a prayer, not a licensed one. I don't ask saints for permission to be kind. The crowd shifts, uneasy. Historians still argue whether trials like these were justice or theatre tools of fear draped in parchment and pomp. In this moment, it feels like both. The judge turns to the audience. Are there any here who would speak in her defense? Silence. Then a cough. Then a voice. The baker, clearing his throat, stepping forward, flour still dusting his sleeves. She gave me a sachet when I couldn't sleep, he says. Didn't ask for anything but a smile. I hadn't smiled in weeks, not since my boy left. And did it work? The judge asks. I don't know, the baker says, but the ache, got quieter. Another voice. The widow, Halsey. She helped my hands. I can knit again. A third. The stonemason. She buried my grief better than the priest. One by one, voices rise. Not loud, not confident, but real, human, uneasy, yet unwilling to be silent. The judge scowls. And what payment did she require? Nothing, says the baker. A grin, says someone else. Hope, says a third. Ellen speaks again. If kindness threatens your balance sheet, perhaps it's not me you need to fear. The judge leans forward. We fear only what invites disorder. You want to scream, but your fingers close tighter around the iron charm. Then, your name is called. Step forward, the judge says. You've been staying under her roof. Have you witnessed anything unnatural? All eyes turn. You walk, slow as fog, to the edge of the platform. You don't speak right away. You breathe. You remember. Then, I've seen tea offered without measure, bread shared without ledger, nightmares soothed, secrets kept, witchcraft. The judge presses. No, you say. Compassion. He narrows his eyes. You are not from here. Your opinion is wind in the reeds. Maybe. But I've walked these fields. I've drunk her potions, and I'm still standing. The crowd murmurs. Ellen places her hand lightly on your shoulder, just for a moment. Her smile is tired, but whole. The judge lifts his gavel not to strike, but to punctuate. This inquiry concludes today. The matter will be reviewed by the diocesan council. Until then, Ellen is to cease all unlicensed healing. Ellen speaks once more. I can stop giving charms, she says. But I won't stop smiling. The judge blinks. Then I suggest, you prepare for consequences. She nods. I always do. As the crowd disperses, the wind picks up. A whispering sort of wind, like it's carrying the names of everyone who ever smiled without asking permission. You walk back to the cottage beside her. No one follows but behind you. A small girl leaves something on the platform. A smile token, worn, splintered, still glowing somehow. The village wakes with something knotted in its throat. The square is quieter than it ought to be. The baker kneads in silence. The blacksmith doesn't hammer today. Even the birds seem to hop instead of fly, their wings folded in caution. Ellen doesn't change her pace. She tends to her herbs. She wraps a loaf for the widow Halsey. She straightens the crooked smile token hanging from the gate as though nothing's shifted at all, though you can feel it. A tension, low and taut, like a string waiting to snap. That the real verdict is not inked. It hovers in glances, in what's not said. And then, it comes. 3 aldermen return. No fanfare, just quiet steps on packed dirt. They wear their ceremonial cloaks, now lined with fur, slightly too warm for spring. Each holds a sealed letter. You know before they speak. Ellen of Thornbridge. Alderman Thulisant tones. Your practices are suspended indefinitely, pending review by the bishopric. You may remain in your home, says Alderman Prynne, but any future healing, blessing, or unlicensed spiritual exchange will be treated as an act of sedition. And finally, Corwin, barely disguising the smug curve in his voice, you are also advised not to encourage smiles. Ellen raises her brows. Shall I frown in hourly increments, or just settle for weeping? No answer. They hand her the letters and depart without waiting for acknowledgement. Their boots crunch in unison as they leave. She doesn't read the letters, she feeds them to the fire. Should you have done that? You ask, voice low. They weren't written for me, she says. Just sent that afternoon. The villagers begin visiting again, but differently. No knocks, no questions. They pass slowly by her gate. Some pause, some leave small things behind. A ribbon, a polished stone, a folded bit of cloth. Not one smile. They're afraid, and yet they remember. Historians still argue whether fear erased folklore or just forced it underground. In Thornbridge, the folklore never left it, simply stopped wearing its name. By evening, the bench outside her door holds more tokens than ever. Ellen doesn't move them. She lights her candle, places it in the window, sits beside it with her, stitching, and waits. Then, footsteps, not hesitant this time, firm, unapologetic. It's the baker's daughter, 12, maybe, cheeks red with either wind or fury. She sets down a wooden carving, a crude attempt at a smile. Token and looks Ellen dead in the eye. Can I still help with the lavender? Ellen blinks. Then, of course, they vanish into the garden, the girl's small hands eager, shaking slightly. You follow later, carrying the basket. The sun dips low, spilling honeylight over rosemary and marjoram. The girl picks with focus. Ellen watches her, saying little, as if weighing the choice to protect her or to trust her strength. Why did you still teach her, you ask, when the girl has gone? Because the ones who come willingly carry more than baskets. That night, a single candle burns at the far end of the lane. Another joins it. Then 2 more. You count 6 by the time the sky darkens fully. No one speaks of them. No one dares acknowledge what they're doing. But you know, so does Ellen. She doesn't smile, but she reaches across the table and gently presses a pouch into your palm. Inside, a folded leaf, a bit of lavender, and one tiny red thread. For silence, she says, and for courage, when silence isn't enough. You sleep with it under your pillow. The wind carries no verdict that night, only the sound of creaking shutters, soft footsteps in damp grass, and just once the tiniest laugh from a child too young to understand politics, but old enough to feel when something kind has been buried. The morning begins without birdsong. Not silence, just a different kind of sound. The hush of expectation. The creak of shutters, opening a second too late. The low murmurs of villagers speaking in smaller voices than usual. You already know. Ellen's not in the garden, not in the kitchen, not humming by the fire with her herbs. You find her just beyond the hedge, seated on the old bench beside the yarrow patch. One hand on her lap, the other holding the tiniest jar you've ever seen. She doesn't look up. They want it to feel like a formality, she says softly. But it isn't. You sit beside her, not touching. Verdict. She nods once. Delivery came at dawn, sealed. From the bishopric. What does it say? That I'm to cease all acts of unsanctioned consolation. You frown. That doesn't even mean anything. It does, she says. To them, it means, I remind people they're allowed to feel better without permission. You don't ask what comes next. She tells you anyway. I'll leave before nightfall. No, you say. They didn't ask you to leave. They didn't have to. The wind picks up. The yarrow leans. The sky is that tupel blue that precedes a long cry. You help her pack. It doesn't take long. She doesn't own much. A few jars, her stitched tokens, the kettle, and one pair of boots that have seen too many winters to be dignified, but are somehow still waterproof. She leaves the hearth tidy. She doesn't lock the door. By midday, word has spread. No one says goodbye outright. That would be a kind of choosing, but they appear, slowly, in 1s and 2s. The widow Halsey brings jam. The baker's daughter offers a carved spoon. The stonemason brings nothing but his silent nod, which is somehow more than enough. and then the child, the one who used to bite his thumb. He toddles up, hands cupped around something invisible, and opens them solemnly in front of Ellen. Nothing there, or maybe everything. She kneels, accepts the invisible gift, and kisses the top of his head. He runs off, giggling. You help her tie the last of her bundles. She tucks the jar of tea meant for bad dreams deep into her satchel. She adds one smile token, just one dot, and then you walk together down the lane, past the well, past the goat, who gives a startled snort but otherwise remains unimpressed, toward the woods, toward the path that vanishes beyond the hill. At the bend, you both stop. You glance back. Thornbridge stands unchanged, and yet, not a single candle glows in Ellen's window. Beside it, on the windowsill, is a folded piece of linen. Someone's placed it there since you left, embroidered with a crooked smile in blue thread. Someone still remembers. You whisper. Ellen nods. That's enough. You hug awkwardly at first, then not. She smells like rosemary and ink. I'll keep the gate straight. You promise. She touches your cheek, and her smile is the softest it's ever been. No defiance, just presence. Then she turns and walks into the woods. She does not look back. Later, you return to the cottage. The door creaks as always. The fire is out, but the hearth feels warm, like it remembers her. You sit at the table. A note waits for you, written in curling, careful letters, for when the forgetting begins, and someone must remind them how to smile. And just like that, you know, the work isn't over, it's yours now. Outside, dusk falls like a curtain drawn softly by hand. The yarrow nods in the wind. A candle flickers beside you, and somewhere, not far off, a laugh escapes into the branches. You keep the cottage warm, not for comfort necessarily, but because cold tries to settle in the empty corners, where her baskets once sat, where her shawl used to hang. The fire doesn't ask questions, it just listens with every crackle. A week passes. Then too, the village adjusts with the stiff-necked grace of people trying not to admit they miss something. The baker's loaves burn more often. The stonemason curses when his joints lock up. Even the chapel feels colder. No sermons change, but the candles gutter more, and the hymns don't rise as loud. You tend the garden, you keep her path clear. Sometimes, villagers come, quietly, at dusk, or just before dawn. They don't knock, they pause by the gate. Some leave tokens, dried petals, bits of cloth, polished buttons. One woman shivering and blotchy with tear sets a thimble on the step and walks away. You recognize her. She used to shake her head when Ellen passed. Now, she glances back, once, then disappears. The truth is, Ellen's gone, but she isn't. She's in the tea you make without measuring, in the herbs you tie with thread you dyed yourself, in the charm pouches you stitch with unsure hands but steady heart. You find yourself smiling more, not because you feel joyful, but because someone should. One evening, a small child appears at the gate, hair tangled, shoes muddy. He carries a toy sheep, half its stuffing trailing like a question. My sister cries in her sleep. He says, you nod. Open the gate. Come in. Let's fix that. He sits by the fire while you grind lavender and rose hips. You hum not a tune, you know, but something the kettle seems to approve of. You hand him a sachet, still warm from your palm. Put this under her pillow, you say. Tell her it's from someone who remembers how to forget. He nods solemnly, leaves, the way he came. That night, you light a candle, not in the window, in the field, at the edge of the barley, where Ellen once stood, brushing fingertips across grain heads, like she was reading the land. You place the flame beside a stone you marked, with her smile, carved crooked and shallow, but enough. The wind rustles the stalks. You imagine her boots, her laugh, that quiet, firm voice that never needed to shout to be heard. The candle flickers, and in that moment, you don't feel alone. Not exactly, because she left something behind in every cup of tea, every thumb-worn charm, every grin exchanged in defiance, of silence, a legacy not of fire or thunder, but of warmth, of choosing joy, quietly, of smiling when the world forgets to. And now, with the candlelight fading and your breath slow and steady, let the last images drift soft across your mind. The cottage, nestled in its yarrow in time, the spoon-stirred silence of tea in an earthen cup, a hedgehog disappearing into the brambles with secrets it never told, the way her eyes crinkled, like leaves pressed into a book of memories. You remember the bench, the herbs, The way the breeze seemed to listen better when she was near. And now, she walks on different roads, through barley fields in other villages, maybe tending fires in places that have forgotten how warmth works. But part of her stays with you, in every button given freely. In every smile not asked for, in the gentle ache that says you were changed by kindness. And now, carry it forward. Let yourself rest in that. In the knowing that some magic doesn't need spells or candles or thunder. It just needs someone to choose love when the world isn't watching. So breathe deep. Let your body soften. Let your thoughts untangle like thread from an old spool. And sleep now. Sleep knowing that somewhere, someone else is smiling into the dark. Because of you.